as my father always used to say, the right tool for the right job, you know? And I always remembered that and try and apply that consciously to each situation, try and read it and feel, how can I best add value to this relationship? How can I best add value to the creative expression of what is intended to manifest here?
That was Alan Kozlowski, photographer, filmmaker, musician, audio engineer, and the guy. You know, the guy that people call when they need a creative force that they can trust, who's going to get it right. That's Alan. A lot of wisdom to be learned from him in this episode. Just keep on listening. 2, 3, Hey there, podcast people. John here. You are listening to Season 2, Episode 8 of Make Moves, featuring an interview with Alan Kozlowski. Alan has done lots of things in his life. Most of them he's done very, very well. And as you're going to hear, his list of accomplishments is just tremendous. I mean, it's almost too much to believe what he's gotten accomplished in his life so far. But to me, the thing that stuck out the most about Alan was the way that one man popped up in all of these different creative circles at a very high level, all over the place, doing all kinds of different things. As a photographer, a filmmaker, a musician, a businessman, you name it, this guy is all over the place. How did this happen? The more I thought about it, I realized that maybe Alan had quietly drawn a much larger circle around all of these other smaller creative circles, and everyone just happens to be in Alan's circle. Maybe that's what's going on. Well, anyway, I think you're going to love this interview. If you're just discovering the show because you're a fan of Alan's, welcome to Make Moves. I hope you will subscribe to the podcast. If you like it, rate it, review it, maybe share it with some friends. And if you're one of our loyal listeners out there, thank you for your continued listening. It sure is a pleasure to have you in our community. Okay, let's get to it and hear an interview. I'll check in with you about the halfway point and play a little bit of music. I'll also stop by at the tail end to give you some parting thoughts. For now, go ahead, turn on your ears, and enjoy this episode. Happy listening. Hey, Alan, thanks for coming on Make Moves.
Thank you, John. It's an honor to be able to interact with somebody with such a famous name.
Hey.
John Hammond was really wonderful early inspiration, both the producer of Dylan and those back then, and then the incredible blues musician, John Hammond. I've always been a huge fan, so you're part of the family.
Yeah, well, I wish the royalty checks would come our way sometimes. I grew up in Los Angeles, and my dad's also a John Hammond, so there was a lot of confusion about the John Hammonds. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that I'm me. I'm this John Hammond, and for better or for worse, that's the life I'm making the most out of. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try and describe you. You have done a lot of things. I think I can name some of those things, but as I was preparing to talk, I found it a little bit challenging to come up with questions that would cast light on all the interconnections between these things. We're going to get to some topics that have a chicken and egg feel to them. I have a hunch that all of your adventures and experiences are somehow related. It doesn't seem like they're linearly related. Maybe I'm wrong. So when you hear me struggling with those questions, be nice, help me out.
Okay.
So here goes. My best attempt to introduce you in under 2 hours and 90 minutes. So you are a seeker. You've funneled lots of diverse experience into, I guess, one body or mind or life or however you think about it. And over time, all of this experience seems to somehow spill out of you as creative work. Mm-hmm. You are a notable photographer, lots of imagery from around the world. I seem to notice a big focus on what looks like Southeast Asia. Tons of iconic musicians and music type images, Leonard Cohen, Jackson Browne, Ravi Shankar, Norah Jones, Crosby, Robbie Krieger. I mean, huge list. You are a cinematographer. You worked on Travelers and Magicians in 2003. Dying to Know with Ram Dass and Tim Leary in 2014. That was right around when Tim Leary was passing away.
Yeah, we when we heard he was dying back in 1995 or 96, we arranged to fly Ram Dass down to have a reunion so that they could talk about all their early days at Harvard. And so we started that project then, filmed all the original material, and then it took 20 years to finish it. Yeah.
Wow. Let's see, you've done major shows for PBS Showcase. You've produced a lot of things that seem to lean towards music. You've worked with Michael McDonald, Jackson Browne, this thing called Yellow Submarine. Some work with Lionel Richie, Kenny Loggins for something on PBS. Concert films. I'm just working down this list here to try and sketch out for listeners out there who I'm talking to right here. You've worked with Ravi Shankar, and I think some of that work that you did, and as far as concert film work, was in cooperation with George Harrison. Is that right?
George and I co-produced a 4 CD box set of Ravi's collected works that George and I put together, went through the whole archive and picked out our favorite tracks, separated into categories. The first CD is solo sitar work from his whole career. Second CD being Indian orchestral work. Ravi pretty much invented the Indian orchestra in the early 40s when he was head of All India Radio. He was the first one putting huge groups of sitar players and tabla players and flute players and string players and vocalists all together and then composing pieces for them. And so that second CD was that. The third CD was East-West collaborations with the likes of Jean-Pierre Rampal, the famous French flautist, Yehudi Menuhin, the incredible classical violinist, and various and sundry Japanese musicians, taiko drum players. And so we put our favorites from that on there. And then the fourth CD was vocal and experimental work, his work that he did with George Harrison, his work that he did with Satyajit Ray, the incredible filmmaker, Indian filmmaker, and Lakshmi Shankar, who he worked, his sister-in-law, he worked with extensively, and she did all the vocal work on the Gandhi soundtrack when Ravi was nominated for an Oscar for best film music for the Gandhi soundtrack. So we did all of that and put it together and then presented it to Ravi, drove down to his house in Encinitas together, George and I, and presented it to him and got his approval. And then I had a big post-production company that had an audio division, and we did all the mastering there. And then George got Rick Ward, who did the Beatles anthology packaging, to design the package for it, and which came out, really wonderfully. And it's one of the projects I'm most honored to have been a part of. Yeah.
It sounds like something else. I mean, I'm looking at this, documentaries, long and short, some about music, some about distant lands, some, I'm not really sure what they are. I think you call them tone poems, but artsy looking pieces that are somehow tone poems. And then you had this whole other thing, like the visual effects and film side. You pioneered some 360 degree, 70 millimeter filming techniques. I read something about you did some 10 screen films or some crazy, I mean, you co-founded this company you speak of, which won Oscars for best visual effects. So, I mean, you're not messing around. And then you're an accomplished musician, like on a super deep level. You've got interest in including flamenco music. I want to say Indian. Is it South Indian or is it?
It's just Indian in general, which is, in studying with Ravi Shankar, with having the blessing to study with him and work with him for 35 years until he passed on in 2012 at the age of 92. But he really incorporated it, and he's a North Indian musician by heritage and Gharana, as which they call the lineage, that was passed down from heart to heart for 2,000 years, and you could trace the lineage all the way back. But he also was a huge fan of South Indian music and incorporated the South Indian ragas and techniques into his compositions as well. You know.
Well, I can tell you're sort of a historian of that. You've you know, ties to some Cuban music. I think you're currently playing in a pretty killer rock band. Is that correct?
Johnny Orion, who has an interesting heritage as well. His uncle was John Steinbeck's son, and then he married Sarah Lee Guthrie, who is Woody Guthrie's granddaughter and Arlo Guthrie's daughter, and so they have the melding of the tribes of America, the literature and music, and so Johnny's an amazing, accomplished songwriter and musician, and asked me if I would help produce the first U.S. Elevator record and play in the band. So I play electric sitar in the band, U.S. Elevator, and also some Rickenbacker 12-string, and you know, co-wrote a few songs together, including one called "Old Man Trump," which took the lyrics that were written by Woody Guthrie. It turns out in the 50s, Woody Guthrie's lived in a house that was owned by a tenement, I guess you would say, that was owned by Donald Trump's father, and
Really?
Who was a total slumlord, and you know, so Woody wrote these lyrics, you know, just lambasting Trump's father. So it was never put to music. So Johnny and I co-wrote the music for it and did a music video for it, sort of in the style of the Bob Dylan Subterranean Homesick Blues, where you're standing, everybody's got the cards and they're pulling off the cards with the lyrics on them, and so you know, it's getting some play now with everything that's going on out there in the world of Trump.
Good timing, yeah. I don't know, so there's about a million more things I could mention, I suppose, but it's almost too much to comprehend for me. Is there anything big, any big category of creative thing that you do that I missed before we get more into some questions about how you approach?
No, yeah, I've been involved in producing music and recording music. I worked as a recording engineer and built recording studios and did all of that. So there's that aspect, and photography. I mean, early on, I was involved in multimedia when multimedia was slide projectors and punch tape programmers, then evolving into computerized programmers, and so I got deep into that and doing big multi-projector slideshows for rock and roll tours, and that's how I met Jackson Browne in 1980. I met him and we put together a 9-projector multimedia background show for his Holdout tour, and then we formed a bond and worked with Jackson for the last 37 years, and very, you know, one of my closest friends, and just an incredible artist. You know, obviously, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, etc.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was very deeply involved in that, and technical director for the Beatlemania show at the Schubert Theater back in '76, I think, in Los Angeles, and so. It exposed me to a lot of wonderful musicians and opportunities and things. So.
Yeah, I mean, really, when I look back, you know, and just sort of try and put all of this stuff on a page, I actually had to write a page just to keep track of what it was. I had to draw a map of your life as preparation here. I mean, you do all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you some questions, you know, about the way you approach work. And actually, I was looking at some of your visual work, photography and film. Some observations that I made, I just wanted to bounce this off you a little bit. And keep in mind, I'm not an expert on photography or film. I don't know anything about it. This is just sort of what I picked up by looking. There's a kind of reverence to the way you deal with visual images. I I don't know if it's like a meditative lens. Nothing's forced. I don't feel like you're ever making a spectacle. You're just sort of there. I don't know if that's the way to describe it.
That's been my approach. Yeah. It's very much speaks to. I was in Tibet back in 2001 with my Buddhist teacher Zangzhe Khyentse Rinpoche, and in the eastern Tibet, I was filming a documentary called "Return to Zangzar," and he initiated me, he educated me as to this process called Mahasandhi, which is immersion in the moment. So it's about finding the moment. It's about experiencing the moment fully without trying to change the moment. So that really affected my visual perception and my approach to both filmmaking and still photography, to just be present, find the moment, and be with it and capture it without trying to change it. And so I was very much affected by that, and became a deep fan of Henri Cartier-Bresson, the incredible French photographer from back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, who had this incredible gift of finding the moment in street photography and capturing just these split-second experiences that, and knowing exactly when to push the shutter, and so that's always inspired me, his work and finding the moment.
There's another thing that I noticed, some in your film and some in the still work, but there's an intimacy to how you get in. How do I say this? There's an intimacy in how the pictures wind up looking, but it seems to be less about getting the shot. It's more about, I see some things and I'm imagining you must have to get really close to people. Put a camera right up next to them, and you capture all the real life stuff that's going on around them while being really close to them. Yeah. Is this something you're conscious of? You try to do it, or it's just how you think now because you've been sort of... being there without impacting it again is for me is the important aspect of it, which allows me to capture the imagery that I want to see and express. And it's allowed me to work intimately with all these different artists so that they're comfortable with me being in the space, being in their space, without it getting in the way of their expression. And so that's, we've worked very closly with Ravi Shankar and Jackson Browne and Jeff Bridges in this way where he's just present, and that I just kind of hopefully dissolve into the background, allow them to express themselves and their art and capture it in a way that offers people a unique view and a unique experience, another window into their world. I went out quite a few years with Jackson Browne when he was doing his solo acoustic tours, where it's Jackson and 15 guitars and a piano on stage, and I did a one-man 6-camera shoots, where I would know exactly not exactly, but had a good hunch of what he'd be doing, and set up cameras in strategic locations, and then would operate one, and he would make jokes about me to the audience about, we're just here in Alan's living room, and which gave me free rein to be on stage, moving around and changing tape and doing things like that as part of the experience without, and at the same time disappearing, and so it, became a real interesting drill doing that. And then in '99, they formed a band for the summer with Jackson Browne, David Lindley,
Bruce Hornsby, Sean Colvin, and Bonnie Raitt, and they got together and learned each other's music and songs, right. And went out and did 30 shows of performing all this amazing music, and they integrated me into the band on stage with a Steadicam and gave me free rein just to wander, and again would make jokes about me to the audience, and so it gave me free rein to find the moment. I would just be up there and tuning into who was going to solo and try and be at the right place at the right time to catch the visual rhythm that goes along with the visual and the musical phrasing, and so that was always really inspired me, and I had some really incredible experiences when it clicks and you find those moments, and yeah.
I wanted to ask you, when you're in the moment, I mean, you said you try not to change the moment, or maybe it's how you said
impact the moment.
Impact the moment. But do you ever have a sense when you're in the moment where you just think, oh, I got, this is it. I know this is the one.
You have those epiphanies every now and then that was real. That was something special and connected, and really captured the essence of this person's expression. Yeah.
So there's this obvious tendency toward projects that involve music for you, whether it's actually music or it's photography or film of some sort. How do you think your experience as a musician, because you're a pretty accomplished musician, how do you think your experience as a musician has sort of helped you shape your unique perspective or abilities to do it the way you do it? Or has it not really mattered?
No, it has. I went to high school in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I was born in Oakland and grew up in Hayward. And in high school, my girlfriend, or hoped to be girlfriend, was Patty Hall, was the president of the Peter, Paul, and Mary fan club, and she was a banjo player and amazing friend. And her father was into world music, and this was 1965, and he bought us tickets to go see Ravi Shankar play at the Shrine Auditorium in San Francisco, and it just totally blew my mind as to a whole another realm of musical expression and possibility. It was right when the Beatles, when George was starting to study with Ravi, and he played, sitar on Norwegian wood, and so there was this whole big change going on. So I had that experience that year. Then my mother, who was a music fan, bought us tickets for her and I to go see Manitas de Plata, incredible gypsy flamenco guitarist. And so we went to see him in San Francisco, which opened up a whole nother world and direction in my life. And then a few months later, we somehow ended up with tickets to see Bob Dylan at the Berkeley Community Theater, and where he did his kind of legendary first half of the concert was solo acoustic, and the second half was with the band, with Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper and company playing electric.
Classic turning moment.
And doing Desolation Row, and and it was just, so those three experiences all of a sudden shifted my awareness to music, and because I wanted to impress Patty, I took up playing folk guitar, and so I started my passion for playing guitar and being in that incredible music culture of the 60s, and opened me up to another type of expression, and which then led me to photography and cinematography and recording music and producing music and all those things. But everything has come from I think my visual component comes from musical phrasing, and I studied, started studying classical guitar, and then after I got out of the draft magically, which is a whole nother story, but I ended up with a one-way ticket from Oakland to London, and ended up hitchhiking down to the south, to Spain, and then all around Morocco, and then back to Spain, and ended up living on a farm outside of Morón de la Frontera, which is a little gypsy town outside of Sevilla, and studying flamenco for 9 months there. And then, so it started, and I really thought at that time that music would be my career. It was certainly my passion. And then I got invited to come back to Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore and study with Aaron Shearer, this legendary classical guitar teacher, and then was on my way back to school there, and I was studying meditation and yoga, and I ended up getting sidetracked, went to a spiritual conference with this spiritual organization in Colorado, and ended up staying, being very moved by it, and staying for 6 years and becoming a celibate monk for 4 years after Free Love in Haight-Ashbury for the 60s. And so that was, 4th of July, 1970. So I stayed there from 1970 to 1976, living on $15 a month in room and board. And they needed somebody to do their recording and editing, and these meditations. They gave me a slide projector and some nature slides, and said, put these to music. So I experimented with that, and then found that at this World's Fair, started seeing this technology of dissolve units and putting images to music. And so that's how I started my visual component. I figured if I was going to show visuals, I should learn how to take them. So I started 1972, taking imagery and mainly nature imagery to start with, and then putting that to music, and doing the programming, and then doing the everything, and put these, as you said, tone poems together. And then when I had an arranged marriage, after being a celibate monk for 4 years, I had an arranged marriage to someone in the organization, and having a son, and then going over the wall, and coming to LA, and I had a little studio in my garage in West Hollywood, and decided to do one of these tone poems, as I called them, using a piece of Ravi's music called Morning Love. It was a duet with Jean-Pierre Rampal. And I fell asleep that night after finishing the programming on the show, and woke up the next morning and realized I had a dream that Ravi came to see the show. And I told my friend that day that I had this dream, and he says, well, I know Dick Bach, who had World Pacific Records, which was Ravi's record company, and brought Ravi to Monterey Pop Festival and Woodstock. And Dick Bach runs the Sai Baba temple here in West Hollywood. I'll bring him over. So that day, Dick Bach shows up on my doorstep, and I show him the show, and he says, oh, that's really far out. Ravi G's coming to town day after tomorrow, and I'll bring him over. So within 3 days of having this dream, up on my doorstep, it shows Ravi G and his small entourage, and I brought him into the studio, and I was nervous because I'd edited the music to make it work with the visuals. I didn't know how he would respond to it, and obviously, this was 1977, so it was 12 years after I'd first gone to the concert and been a huge fan for all those years. And so lights go down, and I show him this 8-minute piece, and the lights come up at the end. And Ravi G was an incredibly large personality, but he was diminutive, I guess you could say, in size. He was only like 5'2", and me being 6'4" at the time, he stood up and looked up at me and said, I've been looking for you for years. And I about fell on the floor, and it started, this 35-year relationship of studying with him, photographing him, filming him. I managed his archive of all his life's work for 25 years, and put these multimedia shows together, and photographing all around India for him, and it started. I'd had this other company called Quantum Leap, doing multimedia shows for the corporate world and for the music world, and then that went out of business, and I lost everything. I had a partner running the business side, and I was running the creative technical side, and they were spending money like it existed, and it didn't exist. And I had personally guaranteed a bank loan for like $100,000, and then the company went out of business, and they called the loan, and I had to sell my house and to pay off the loan, and I lost everything, and started again at age 35 with selling my Lionel train set from when I was a kid for $65 for food money, and so I hit rock bottom, and then the phone rang, and after I decided to pull myself out of this funk by running a marathon, so I trained and ran the first LA Marathon in 1983, and I was somehow made it through it and was recovering on the couch, a bit nauseous from the exertion and everything, and the phone rang magically, and it was another piece of Ravi magic calling from London saying he was going to do this big event called Uday Utsav to honor his elder brother Ravi Shankar, who was his first teacher and influence. He was 20 years older, and was an incredible creative force in India, and doing dance and theater and all these amazing things, and that was a huge influence on Ravi. And so Ravi wanted to honor him since he had died, and asked me to come to India and to photograph all over India for him, and put this multimedia show together to be part of the festival that December of '83. And I said, well, I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't have any money, and I was broke and just starting all over. And he said, well, that was in March, and he said, I want you to come in July. And magically the next day the phone rang, and I got all this multimedia programming work and made money, worked every single day until July, when I took off to India and met Ravi there, and he sent me all over India to photograph for him, and then came back to LA, and magically the work started flowing again, and I, with my partner at the time, Sandra Hay, put together this 9-projector multimedia show, and took it back to India for the Uday Utsav, and knew I had to film this festival because it was going to be incredible, and found this banker from Bank of America who somehow shouldn't have, but he loaned me $40,000, and I bought one of the first Sony Betacam cameras, and took it back to India in November '83, and ended up filming the festival, and then the Taj Mahal and all this material with Ravi, and came back and needed a way to edit it, and borrowed $14,000 from Sandra's sister, and bought an editing system, and started editing that project, but also doing music videos and exercise videos for the likes of Richard Simmons and et cetera. It's kind of a departure there, but it ended up, but that was the beginning of creating my new company that started, called Visualize, Visualeyes, and then as it grew, we spun off the production company Visualize and formed POP, which was Pacific Ocean Post, and that grew from the two of us to, over a 15-year period of time, to 300 employees and 6 divisions, and a lot of success. Got the 3 Oscars 3 years in a row for working on 3 different films, and it grew and grew and grew, and just all which I attribute to the magic of Ravi and his blessings. When we moved to our new building, he played a house blessing concert in our atrium, and because of Ravi, I got to be close with George Harrison, who would come into my office and play guitar in my office, and which obviously created some buzz in the company. And,
I can imagine, yeah.
And created projects together, and then I would tour with Ravi when I could, but the company was pretty much all consuming, and by the end we had like a $3 million overhead a month, and I had to go out and find $3 million worth of work every month. And so I set the intent of being able to liberate myself from that eventually, and magically was able to sell the company when it was at the top of its game and go back to working, spending the next 12, 13 years working closely with Ravi Ji while he was still on the planet, which was my goal. So that was a long-winded...
What a wild
approach. Sorry for rambling on. It kind of gives you the...
I think if anyone has had that experience, they deserve the time to explain it. I mean, it's just not... It doesn't happen every day.
Yeah. It's all blessings. And humbly speaking, as I have said on numerous occasions, without Ravi in my life as my teacher and guru and mentor and the father figure, my life would have been a mistake. It wouldn't have had anywhere near, just like musically, I don't consider myself in the same sentence with Ravi Shankar, but I had, for some reason, the blessing to go out and tour with him and play tambura on stage with him all around the world, which isn't necessarily about musical accomplishment. It's the same 5 notes and a drone over and over. You're holding the space, but just the blessing to be able to be on stage with him and play in stages all around the world, Carnegie Hall, Kennedy Center, Concertgebouw, and in Amsterdam, and the Champs-Élysées Theater in Paris, and all these amazing places, and be sitting 4 feet from the juice and have that expression and the opportunity to witness his ability to find the moment, which was he never failed to find the moment. He was just the most incredible man I've met in my life.
That was US Elevator playing their tune Pineapple Express off their self-titled album, US Elevator. I feel like I have to introduce one of these chicken and the egg questions.
Okay.
You are, I think one of the other accomplishments that it's maybe not a creative accomplishment, but you seem to be that trusted guy. Mm-hmm. You work with a lot of people who probably have the capacity to work with whoever they want. Mm-hmm. And for some reason they pick you. And I'm not trying to diminish your talents or your skills, but it's sort of, when they have skin in the game, when they have to reveal themselves, when they have to make themselves open, they bring you in to just be there and document and do these things. And I kind of have a 2-part question. Why do you think that is? And there's something about relationships here. I'm not sure, are the relationships leading you to the creative work, to the accomplishments? Is it the accomplishments that lead you to the relationships, that lead you to the... How does all of this work?
Trust is a big factor, and I think I've demonstrated over the years, and I've certainly had the intent to do it. I've certainly made my mistakes like everybody has, but doing things with integrity. Integrity is everything in those relationships, and so honoring them with integrity, and also so these people that I've worked with know that I would never put something out into the world, without agreement, and just also really focusing that it's not about, and it took a lot of focus and meditation on it to, not be engaged in the reflected glory of, it's real easy to, being around these people like George and Ravi, and who are so accomplished and so famous and so genius in what they do, to not think and not to try and work that in a way that it makes it about me instead of them, of being able to be present with it and support it and not work it for the reflected glory, I guess, is the real fine line of surrender of the ego and the and so you can strip that away and just be with the essence, so that it's really about the process and not about, enough about me, what do you think of me? Right. So all of those things kind of fit together, and the trust, obviously, I've worked very hard to develop the technical skills in the craft.
It's not like it's not like choosing you to work on any project would be unfounded. You've accomplished a bazillion things, but
and trying to choose the right technology for each expression, whether it's a visual expression or a sound expression or a film still, it's all each different circumstance. You try and, as my father always used to say, the right tool for the right job, and I always remembered that, and try and apply that consciously to each situation, and try and read it and feel, how can I best add value to this relationship? How can I best add value to the creative expression of what is intended to manifest here? And so it all kind of, it's all kind of there at the same time. So I'm not sure there's a chicken and an egg. There is the global the global fried egg, I guess, of all manifesting as the pieces come together.
As a seeker, which you seem to be, you're always trying to find new things, but it seems like you always have a knack, or have had a knack, for finding just the right teacher, or maybe they find you at the right time. And I read an article that, I don't know, it looked like it was in black and white, scanned from a long time ago, but I guess at one point you studied
music is thing, that one, the picture of me playing the sitar with that was 1967. You found teachers for flamenco music. You wound up with Ravi Shankar. You mentioned that you found teachers at one point. You were a monk, and you were sort of learning all this stuff. I think lots of people want to know things, but very few people are willing to put themselves in the position of, I will accept the teacher. I will make space to be the student. Right. And I was wondering, that's something that's very important to me.
Yeah, are you mindful of connecting with people as teachers, or do you do anything specifically to keep yourself open to the idea that they might find you or you might find them, or that that's the right role? Or do you not even think about this and you've just sort of done it over and over?
It's an organic process. Yeah, I've been blessed, obviously, to have Ravi show up in my life and become my teacher. You can use the word guru. He's my music guru, but influenced me much deeper on many levels. And then I had a business guru mentor who coached me through all the years, and he was the one who encouraged me to, when I had the company that went out of business, I was just doing the technical and creative. In the second company, POP, Jack Holzman, who encouraged me that I could be the businessman too. And Jack was an incredible businessman and creative person and technologist. Jack was the founder of Elektra Records. He founded Elektra back in 1952 in his dorm room, and with his $3,000 worth of bar mitzvah money, and started the record company and was really at the forefront of creating the record industry early on. He was the first one ever to create the sampler albums, where he would have 12 different artists, each with one track on a vinyl album, and put it out there at a reduced rate to introduce people to new artists. And so he was really a forerunner of so many amazing things in the music industry. And he's still at age 86, he's still very active. He's still a consultant in the music industry and still passionate about it. And Jack was one who discovered the Doors, signed them to their first record contract, and just had done so many things. And I met him and we did a couple workshops together and became quite close. And when my second company was we had somebody running the business side of that company, and I was again doing the technical and creative, and the partner wanted to run it out of business and close the doors, and I said, no way, not to go through that again. And Jack, no questions asked, stepped up and loaned me $50,000 and just said, pay it back when you can. And I somehow managed, on the exact day I had agreed to pay the money back, I managed to come up with the $50,000 to do that. And he said I was the first friend who had ever paid him back money on time. And they bonded our relationship. And that was 1986. And he coached me through all the next 12 years of running that company and growing it and being a CEO as opposed to just a technical and creative force. And so all those things came together. And then another mentor who showed up magically in my life, Haskell Wexler, the incredible Oscar-winning cinematographer. He received Oscars for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton back in the 60s, and then shot the Bound for Glory, the Woody Guthrie story. They got an Oscar for that as well, and shot so many films. And so he was my mentor in cinematography, and Diego del Gastoro was my incredible mentor for flamenco guitar. And somehow I've been blessed with teachers showing up, and I've been really, I guess I have really striven, is that the right words, for finding experts, knowing that I could make much more progress, and by learning from the experts. So I've been blessed to finding them and having them take me under their wing. And now I'm in a phase of life of really trying to give that back to others and mentor others, including my wonderful 11-year-old daughter, Lily, who is passionate about ukulele and piano, and with her godfathers being her main great godfather was Ravi, who gave her middle name of Kalyani, which is in name Yaman Kalyan is the name of a South Indian raga, and also means blessing. So he gave her her middle name, and she got to go to her first Ravi concert while she was still in the womb in Paris at the Champs-Élysées Theater, and then got to be at his last concert that we did in 2012, November 12th, which he managed to perform, wheeled out on stage on oxygen in a wheelchair, and sat down and ripped for an hour and a half, and we filmed it with 12 cameras, and then put him back in the wheelchair, and he waved goodbye to everyone, and that was his end of his musical expression. He died 3 weeks later, and he left it all on stage. Total magic. But yeah, so it's a cycle. So it's the passing it down from teacher to student to teacher to student over years and years, and now I'm at a phase of my life and life expression to where I can give back, and so I'm doing my best to mentor those who seek me out, and give back something to pass on these wonderful blessings that I've been given.
I think when we first started talking, you said something about things being passed on heart to heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a sweet
way
of thinking about it.
Indian music, that tradition of guru shiksha relationship of passing it down from heart to heart, and Indian music is very much a vocal expression. It's passed down. It's not a written tradition. It's passed down, from teacher to student over generations, and so that's a very time-honored tradition that I still try and bring that into Western expression as well, and trying to help those who strive for that in both visual and sound and music expression.
So it's kind of hard not to notice this about you, but it seems like you go all in to things. You don't.
Anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
I'm sort of recapping in my mind here. Want to study flamenco music? Go find a master in Spain. Indian music? Go find the master. Photography leads to film, leads to starting a company, leads to this endless traveling. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much of this is a sort of an offshoot of our conversation here, but it seems like you love to travel, and then I'm looking on your website, and there's this little teeny link. You've been all around the world. You see all these things, and it says something like, "This is my retreat." Mm-hmm. You created a space in one of these places that you like to go travel. I mean, you don't go halfway. It seems like. But have you always been like that, or did something happen when you were 10 years old?
No, I never. I didn't take my first plane flight till my 20th birthday. I got the one-way ticket from after I'd magically gotten out of the draft by flunking my hearing test. I got a one-way ticket from Oakland to London, and that was my first plane flight. And then having that experience in Spain and Morocco and everything just really opened up my world. And then managed, when I was living in the spiritual organization, we did pilgrimages around the world through the Holy Land, and climbed the Great Pyramid at 3 a.m, and I had a sunrise meditation on top of the Great Pyramid in the autumn equinox in 1972, and then went all around in 1973, went all around South America, and had the arranged marriage on the island of the Sun in Lake Titicaca in Peru, and then went to Machu Picchu for our honeymoon night. And so that got my juices going. And then when Ravi invited me to go to India with him in 1983 and photograph all over India, that started I'd always been a huge fan of Indian music and Indian culture and yoga and everything, but going there really cemented that. So I've probably been to India 15 times, and then my study of Buddhism, I was invited, I've been 4 trips to Tibet, and did a book on photography called On the Path to Tibet, and then my Buddhist teacher was also a filmmaker, and they do these things called mo's where they do divining, and they did a mo and that said that I was supposed to be the director of photography on Travelers and Magicians. So got to go spend 3 months in Bhutan. It was the first feature film shot in Bhutan, and so created that film, and had the wonderful opportunity to spend 3 months in Bhutan, which is very rare. And so all that experience in that realm, I had stopped on my way to Tibet to Thailand and magically ran into this person who my friend wanted me to introduce me to, and who was building a wellness retreat on the island of Koh Samui in the Gulf of Thailand. And so went down and saw this land, and I'd sold the company, so I had a little bit of money, and ended up buying the land right next to the wellness retreat, and ended up building this retreat on 2.5 acres, all with recycled materials, a temple structure we brought from Bali, and 100-year-old teak shingles, and it's quite a place. It's called Samudra, which means is Sanskrit for gathering of the waters, and we have 200 meters of beachfront and 8 bedrooms on the beach, and 200 meters down the beach is Kamalaya, which is this incredible wellness retreat. And so you go there it's my country club, go and get treatments and be well, and it's a good. So my vision for Samudra was as a landing zone, decompression zone for the Far East. So you go over there and get unjet lagged, and then go off and explore. You're within striking distance of India and Bhutan and Tibet and Mongolia and all these other places that I love. And so this photography is all from Mongolia and Tibet, and those places which
it's really striking.
Oh, thank you. You can't see it on the podcast.
Yeah.
But you can go see it at alankozlowski.com or alankozlowskiphotography.com. Actually, alankozlowski.photography. There's no .com on Alan.
Listeners, I encourage you to do this.
Yeah.
A couple of random questions as I'm wrapping up. Are there any things in life that you think can only be learned the hard way?
Humility. Yeah, you have to pay your dues. You have to go through things, and sometimes, you can be overly enthusiastic and get beat back into the ground, like the couple of companies I had that failed, and it started from scratch all over again. So, one of the big lessons I learned that I really valued is in those 6 years living in the spiritual community, where I developed my skill set of audio engineering and photography and all of those skills. I did that not for money. I was making $15 a month in room and board for 6 years, and so I really did them for the right reason. I was doing them to create excellence, not to create money. And in running the company and building POP, I felt we had our agenda really straight of creating excellence, creating an environment, creating an artist community. Money was the marker as to whether it was feedback loop, I guess you could say, as if we were on course and doing the right thing, that was feedback from the universe. But that was not the goal of doing it, to create the money, but that was the natural byproduct if you're doing it right. So that's kind of those lessons learned along the way. Were they hard lessons sometimes? They're painful, and I grew from those, and hopefully as Buckminster Fuller used to say, you never learn less. And, I've tried to continue on that path. And the other, pardon all my little quotes, but the other one that always meant a lot to me was ride the horse in the direction that it's going.
Right.
I like that one. And then my byline I used to be the spokesperson for Kodak, and they'd fly me around the world and speak at conferences. And the byline in all the print ads and things like that was, if you don't have 1 foot in the future, you've got 2 feet in the past.
So this is sort of my, we'll call this my closing thought, and then I'm going to give you a chance to tell people where they can find out more about you, which I think you already mentioned once. You've accomplished a ton of things, I think all in good spirit, but I'm wondering if you feel like there's any unfinished things that you need to straighten out, or if you have any things that are just clearly the next thing on your list that you've got to get to.
I have one project that's still, I working with Ravi Shankar for all those years and managing his archive and documenting him and everything. I put together, when he passed, a 35-minute short film called Sangeet Ratna, which means jewel of music, which included his last 3 minutes of musical expression at that concert 3 weeks before he died. That's how the film ends right now. But I've really committed to expanding that into a feature-length documentary. Hopefully doing it through the eyes of his 2 wonderful daughters, Nora Jones, which many people don't know that Ravi was Nora's father, and Anushka Shankar, who's an incredible musician, Nora's half-sister. And so I really want to expose Ravi's genius to another generation of people, and so I'm working on that and putting together. I just shot the first of his new series of interviews to finish off the film. Just filmed David Crosby. He came over last week, and we filmed him talking about, because apparently he was the one who introduced Indian music to George Harrison.
Oh, really?
Back in the 60s when he was with the Byrds. He was touring in London and gave George his first Ravi album. And so that's a project that is, I feel like I'm the one who needs to do it, since I've had all those years of blessings by him, and it's a chance to give back something to his legacy. And so that's, I feel like I had this health crisis last year, about 11 months ago, and almost died. And I had to have emergency surgery in Thailand to save my life. And I went all the way down the tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel, there was Ravi and my daughter and Lily and son Stephen. And it just snapped me back, and I realized I still had something I had to accomplish here. So that was, it's been really engaging me to figure out how to do that and accomplish it before I leave.
Well, I thank you for your time. You mention your website, social media. Where should people find you when they have more questions? Which they will.
On Facebook, there's Alan Kozlowski Images and Alan Kozlowski Photography are 2 pages. And I also have 2 websites, alankozlowski.com, AlanKozlowski.com. That has a lot of my film work and different categories of photography, and then I just got asked to do this exhibition here in Santa Barbara of music portraits. It's called Making Music, and it's at Soho Music Club here in Santa Barbara. And so I have 25 large prints of portraits, musicians I've worked with over the last 40 years. And so I created a special website just for that. It's called alankozlowski.photography. So you can see there's some videos on there of my work and a tour of the exhibition hosted by Jeff Bridges. And so, that's a chance to see the photography there and acquire it if one is so inclined.
I'm sure I've got some loyal listeners out there. I'm sure they're inquisitive folks. I'm sure they'll be checking. Listeners, I will post links to all that stuff in the show notes, which I'll write as soon as I can.
Okay.
But for now, I think I need to let you get off to dinner. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John.
For taking this time.
Totally
with me.
honored to be part of your
Really
podcast.
is my pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah. Hope to keep in touch. Be well. All right, there you have it, everybody. This episode is coming to a close. Big thanks to Alan for coming on the show. Boy, what an accomplished guy and a sweetheart of a person. Really did enjoy talking with him. I hope you all enjoyed it too. I'd encourage you to swing by makemoveswithjohn.com, find the blog post for this episode. You'll be able to get the links to find out more about Alan and also US Elevator, that great music we featured in the middle of the episode. If any of you have feedback, please do share it with us. You can shoot off an email to feedback@makemoveswithjohn.com or hit us up on any of the social media platforms. Just search Make Moves with John. You'll find us. We'll be there. Okay, next episode's coming real soon. That's going to feature John Lee Dumas, a very influential podcaster. Can't wait to share it with you. But until that happens, please do take good care of yourselves and go out there and make moves.